Welcome to this deep dive. I think a lot of our listeners have been curious about this guy, Michel de Montaigne,
Oh, yeah.
this Renaissance philosopher,
Mm-hmm.
famous for all those essays he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some excerpts from Spanish language book
Yeah.
about him kind of focusing on, his life, his ideas. And
That's great.
our mission, well, I guess our mission is to try and give you a solid understanding of like his core philosophies and why they still matter, today.
Yeah.
And maybe we can dig up some of those intriguing little tidbits that you wouldn't find in, just a typical biography.
Yeah, I think Montaigne's ideas are just so fascinating, and they
Yeah.
still resonate so much, even now.
Yeah, let's just start with like the backdrop of his life.
Okay.
I mean, he was alive during a pretty turbulent time in European history, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine Europe in the 16th century, like religious wars are raging, the printing press is like spreading all these new ideas,
Wow.
and, long-held beliefs about the world and ourselves are being challenged left and right.
So how did Montaigne navigate all this upheaval?
Well, he kind of embraced skepticism.
Okay.
He was famous for questioning everything, from religious dogma to even like what the ancient philosophers were saying.
Okay.
And his motto was, "Que sais-je?"
I don't know what that means.
It means, what do I know?
Oh.
He really believed in the power of independent thinking and just refused to blindly accept any authority.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like he anticipated all the challenges that we face today in like our own information age.
I know, it's true.
Wow.
He was living in a time of just massive change, like intellectually and socially.
Yeah.
And he saw skepticism as a necessary tool for navigating that change.
Okay.
It wasn't about like tearing everything down. It
Yeah.
was more about like clearing away the debris of all this dogma and prejudice so you could build something more solid.
And speaking of like building something solid,
Yeah.
I understand that Montaigne had a pretty unusual upbringing.
He did.
Oh.
His father had some pretty unique ideas about education. For the first few years of Montaigne's life, he was raised by a peasant family,
Right.
and they only spoke Latin to him.
Oh my gosh, only Latin.
Only Latin.
Wow. That's a commitment to language immersion.
Yeah.
So what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, Pierre Équem, that was Montaigne's father,
Okay.
he believed that this unusual approach would instill a sense of humility in his son
Yeah.
and a connection to common people.
Yeah.
He thought it would give Montaigne a strong moral compass and also just a really deep appreciation for like the complexities of language.
That's pretty forward thinking for a 16th century parent.
Right.
So did this unusual childhood influence Montaigne's own views on education?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
He became a huge advocate for an education that really prioritized critical thinking and
Yeah.
real-world experience
Okay.
over rote memorization.
Yeah.
In his essay on the education of children, he really critiques like the traditional emphasis on, cramming students' heads with facts.
Yeah.
And he argues instead for the development of what he called a well-furnished head,
Okay.
one that can analyze, question, and form independent judgments.
So he saw education as more about cultivating the ability to think for yourself
Yeah,
than, just simply absorbing information.
exactly.
Yeah.
He thought true knowledge comes from actively engaging with the world and testing ideas against experience,
Right.
and then forming your own conclusions.
And that ties in with his overall, philosophy of skepticism.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't just questioning authority, he was questioning like the process of learning itself.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
You've really hit on something crucial there.
Yeah.
For Montaigne, skepticism wasn't about rejecting knowledge outright.
Right.
It was more about recognizing the limitations of human understanding
Right.
and just remaining open to new perspectives.
Okay, so now I get to ask you about this friendship with Etienne de la Boétie.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like this relationship had a huge impact on his life and work.
Oh, it was a defining relationship for Montaigne.
They just shared such a deep intellectual and
Yeah.
emotional bond.
Yeah.
And La Boétie's death,
Yeah.
which was untimely,
Right.
was just devastating for Montaigne.
Wow.
Like he lost part of himself.
I understand that La Boétie was a brilliant thinker in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
So what were some of his key ideas and how did they influence Montaigne?
Well, La Boétie was a humanist philosopher,
Mm.
and he's best known for this work called Discourse on Voluntary Servitude.
Okay.
And in it, he explores like the dangers of blind obedience to authority
Okay.
and argues for individual freedom and responsibility.
Now, I can see how those ideas would have resonated with Montaigne,
Yeah.
given his own skepticism about authority.
Definitely.
So did this loss shape Montaigne's writing in any way?
Profoundly.
Okay.
Montaigne actually began writing his essays a few years after La Boétie's death.
Oh, wow.
And you can really feel the weight of that loss throughout the work.
Oh, it's almost as if the essays became a way for Montaigne to continue those conversations that he had with La Boétie.
Wow.
Just grappling with life's big questions, even in the face of loss and uncertainty.
That's pretty incredible. It's a real testament to their friendship.
Yeah, it is.
It makes me want to dive into the essays myself.
You should.
And hear those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the essays?
Sure.
What makes them so unique and compelling,
Yeah.
even after all these centuries?
Well, the essays are just this fascinating blend of personal reflection, philosophical inquiry, and observations about the world around him.
Yeah.
They're deeply introspective, with Montaigne using his own life as a testing ground for his ideas.
Interesting.
And, he constantly revised them and added to them
really?
throughout his life.
Wow.
Which shows us, his evolving intellect.
So he didn't see his ideas as like fixed pronouncements,
No.
but as part of like an ongoing process of exploration and discovery.
That's right. And that's one of the things that makes the essays so engaging.
Yeah.
You actually see Montaigne wrestling with these complex issues, changing his mind, refining his thoughts, and then ultimately inviting the reader to join him on that journey.
And at the heart of that journey is this belief in the importance of self-knowledge.
Absolutely.
Right.
Montaigne believed that by understanding ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, our contradictions, we can actually better understand the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
And he famously said, "Every man bears the entire stamp of the human condition."
Wow.
He saw his own experiences as like a microcosm of human experience as a whole.
So for him, self-reflection wasn't just about like navel-gazing.
Right.
It was a path to understanding something larger than oneself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was about recognizing our shared humanity,
Mm-hmm.
our common struggles, and ultimately cultivating empathy and compassion for ourselves and others.
It's a powerful message.
Yeah.
Especially in like today's world,
I know.
where we're often encouraged to focus on like external validation and comparison.
Yeah. It's an antidote to that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
Montaigne's essays remind us that the most important journey we can take is the journey inward to understand who we are and what we value.
And this journey inward led him to some pretty unconventional views for his time,
Mm-hmm.
particularly his thoughts on the relationship between humans and animals.
Right.
He was way ahead of his time.
He was.
I mean,
He was a keen observer of the natural world, and he really challenged that prevailing view of human superiority over animals.
there's that famous anecdote where he wonders if his cat might be mocking him, just as he mocks the cat.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I love
It's a really playful observation,
Yeah.
but it reveals a deeper challenge to that anthropocentrism.
Right.
He questioned whether humans are truly the pinnacle of creation and suggested we're simply part of a larger interconnected web of life.
So instead of seeing like a rigid hierarchy,
Yeah.
he saw more of a fluid
Yeah.
and complex relationship between humans and, the rest of the natural world.
Exactly. And this tied into his broader critique of human vanity and presumption.
Okay.
He constantly reminded his readers of the vastness and mystery of the universe and urged them to approach the world with humility and a sense of wonder.
I like that.
Yeah.
So while he was a skeptic,
Mm,
he wasn't a cynic.
right?
He still believed in like the power of wonder
Totally.
and the importance of connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things that makes Montaigne so relevant today.
Yeah.
He encourages us to embrace both critical thinking and a sense of awe,
Right.
to question everything while remaining open to the beauty and complexity of the world around us.
And I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground in our exploration of Montaigne's life
We have.
and early influences,
We have.
but there's so much more to come.
There is.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind of Michel de Montaigne. We're picking up where we left off, exploring, how his skepticism and his unique upbringing shaped his ideas.
Yeah. And we're about to enter a period in history that really shook things up intellectually.
Oh, yeah.
The age of exploration,
Right.
the discovery of the new world.
Yeah. This must have been a time of just incredible upheaval
Yeah.
for European thought.
Totally.
How did Montaigne respond to all these new discoveries.
Well, you can imagine like the impact of encountering all these like different cultures and languages and belief systems.
Yeah.
It really challenged everything that Europeans thought they knew about the world and even about themselves.
Yeah, it's like the map of reality was being redrawn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Montaigne, ever the skeptic,
Right.
he saw this as like an opportunity to question all the prevailing assumptions of his time.
So what specific assumptions was he, like, targeting?
Well, one of the big ones was this idea that European culture and values were superior to all others.
Oh, wow.
He questioned the very concept of civilization
Yeah.
as it was understood in Europe and suggested that other ways of life, even those that were considered savage by Europeans,
Yeah.
might hold their own wisdom and values.
So he was challenging this idea of a single universal standard of civilized behavior.
Absolutely. He was really pushing his readers to consider the possibility that their own values and beliefs might not be the only valid ones.
This makes me think of his famous essay on cannibals,
Oh, yeah.
where he discusses the practices of indigenous peoples in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly an easy read,
No, it's not.
but he doesn't just like condemn cannibalism outright.
No, he doesn't. He uses it as a lens to examine European prejudices.
Oh, okay.
You know, he asks, what right do we have to judge other cultures
Right.
based on our own limited perspective?
Yeah.
And he doesn't condone the practice,
Right.
but he forces us to confront the hypocrisy and the violence
Mm-hmm.
that's often present in European society itself.
So he's using this cultural clash
Yeah.
to hold up a mirror to his own society,
Exactly.
to force them to confront their own shortcomings.
Precisely, he suggests that the line between civilization and barbarity
Right.
is not as clear-cut as Europeans might like to believe.
But doesn't this kind of cultural relativism
Mm-hmm.
lead to this idea that anything goes?
Right.
That there's no, like, objective right or wrong?
Well, that's a common misconception about Montaigne.
Okay.
While he did recognize the diversity of, human customs and beliefs, he still believed in a natural moral law.
Okay.
He just didn't think it could be easily, defined or codified.
So for him, morality wasn't about just blindly following a set of rules.
No.
It was something more complex.
It was much more complex. For Montaigne, morality emerged from lived experience,
Right.
from our interactions with others, from our ongoing efforts to understand ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah.
It was about cultivating a virtuous character
Okay.
through self-reflection, empathy,
Yeah.
and a constant striving for truth.
And that idea, constant striving, really resonates with his emphasis on education as an ongoing process.
Exactly.
It seems like he saw life itself as a continual process of learning and self-discovery.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
He believed that true learning comes from engaging with the world, from questioning assumptions, and from being open to new experiences and perspectives.
Yeah.
And he saw this process of learning as essential to living a good and meaningful life.
So it wasn't just about accumulating knowledge.
Right.
It was about developing a certain way of being in the world.
Yeah.
A way of approaching life with curiosity, humility, and a willingness to constantly challenge your own beliefs.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is one of Montaigne's most enduring legacies.
Mm-hmm.
He reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge is not a passive activity.
Right.
It requires active engagement, critical thinking, and a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones.
And speaking of stepping outside of our comfort zones,
Yeah.
Montaigne was also a really vocal critic of some of the prevailing practices of his time.
Particularly when it came to justice and punishment.
Oh, yeah. He was deeply troubled by the use of torture and the death penalty.
Oh, wow.
He saw these practices as barbaric and ineffective.
Yeah.
And he argued that human judgment is inherently flawed and that punishing people based on uncertain evidence is both cruel and unjust.
It's amazing how relevant his critique remains, even centuries later.
I know it's true.
We're still grappling with these same issues.
Absolutely. Montaigne forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the limits of human judgment
Yeah.
and the potential for abuse of power,
Right.
particularly within the justice system.
And his skepticism seems to play a key role here.
Definitely.
By questioning everything, by refusing to take things for granted,
Yeah.
he was able to see the flaws in systems that so many others just accepted without question.
Yeah, you're right. His skepticism wasn't about being cynical or negative.
Right.
It was about being clear-eyed,
Okay.
about seeing the world as it is with all its complexities and contradictions. And this allowed him to challenge the status quo
Yeah.
and push for a more just and humane society.
So it seems like his skepticism wasn't just an intellectual exercise.
Right.
It was really deeply connected to his moral values.
Yeah.
his belief in the importance of compassion and understanding.
Absolutely. For Montaigne, skepticism was a tool for cultivating a more just and humane world.
Yeah.
It was about recognizing the limits of human knowledge, the fallibility of human judgment, and the importance of treating others with compassion and respect.
And these are themes that run throughout his work.
Definitely.
Even when he's grappling with difficult subjects like cannibalism or the complexities of cultural difference, you sense this underlying belief in the importance of human dignity and the need for understanding.
Exactly. He may have been a skeptic, but he was also a humanist deeply concerned with the human condition and the search for meaning and purpose in a world full of uncertainty.
And this brings us to another key aspect of Montaigne's thought.
His exploration of the search for meaning in a world that seemed to be constantly shifting and changing.
Right. Well, the discovery of the New World,
the
religious wars, the intellectual upheavals of the Renaissance.
Right.
All of this contributed to a sense of uncertainty and a questioning of traditional sources of meaning. And Montaigne, he grappled with these questions head on in his essays.
So in a world that was losing its old certainties, how did Montaigne propose that we find meaning and purpose?
Well, he didn't offer any easy answers or dogmas.
Okay.
Instead, he encouraged a process of self-discovery.
Okay.
Of turning inward to explore one's own thoughts and feelings and experiences. He believed that by understanding ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, our contradictions, we could find a kind of inner compass to guide us through the uncertainties of life.
So instead of looking outward for answers, he was suggesting that we look inward.
Exactly. He believed that true meaning wasn't something that's imposed from the outside, but something that's cultivated from within.
Right.
It was about finding a way to live authentically, to embrace the complexities of life, and to find joy and purpose in the everyday experiences of being human.
And that idea of finding joy and purpose in the everyday seems to tie back to his emphasis on friendship, connection, and engagement with the world.
Right.
Even amidst all his questioning and skepticism, he wasn't a recluse or a cynic.
No, he wasn't. He believed in living a full and engaged life, cultivating meaningful relationships, and finding pleasure in the simple things. For Montaigne, true happiness wasn't about achieving some grand goal or conquering the world. It was about living in harmony with oneself and with nature, finding contentment in the present moment, and appreciating the beauty and wonder that surrounded him.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
It almost seems to anticipate some of the ideas we find in modern mindfulness practices. And the emphasis on finding joy in the present moment.
Absolutely. Montaigne may have been writing centuries ago, but his insights into the human condition, the search for meaning, and the importance of living a full and engaged life are still incredibly relevant today.
We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've seen how Montaigne responded to the challenges of his time, how he used his skepticism to critique injustice and hypocrisy, and how he encouraged a process of self-discovery as a path to meaning and happiness.
We have, and we're not finished yet.
Oh, there's still more.
There's still much more to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind of Michel de Montaigne. I'm really excited to explore his later works, see how his thinking evolved as he got older.
It's amazing to see him wrestling with even bigger questions as he matures.
Throughout our deep dive, I've been really struck by how Montaigne's work isn't just intellectually stimulating. It's also really personal and engaging.
Oh, he had this incredible ability to connect with readers across centuries.
It's true.
It's like he's inviting you into this conversation. Sharing his doubts, his insights, his struggles, and ultimately his love for life.
Yeah, and this is final part of our exploration. I'm curious to discover what makes his work so timeless. What are those remarkable forms that you mentioned earlier? The ones that make Montaigne so unique and enduring.
Well, one of the most remarkable things about Montaigne is just his unwavering commitment to self-observation. He just turns that lens inward, examining his own thoughts and experiences with just a level of honesty and depth that was really rare for his time.
Yeah, it seems like he was almost radically honest.
He was.
Especially considering the emphasis on outward appearances and social conformity back then.
Right. He totally challenged those norms by embracing vulnerability and celebrating the messy, contradictory nature of human experience.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to show his flaws, his doubts, his inconsistencies. In fact, he saw those imperfections as essential
Totally.
to understanding what it means to be human.
Absolutely.
And he does it all with such wit and charm.
He does.
You know, reading the essays never feels like a chore.
Right.
It's like having a conversation with this, like, wise and witty friend
Exactly.
who's seen it all.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key reasons why his work has endured for centuries.
Yeah.
He just speaks to something universal in the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the joys and sorrows, the doubts and uncertainties, the search for meaning and connection.
It's inspiring that even though he was constantly questioning everything,
Yeah.
he never lost his sense of wonder and curiosity.
Never. He never did.
And that's something that I think we can all learn from.
I agree.
Yeah.
And, you know, he encourages us to cultivate that same spirit of inquiry.
Right.
He reminds us that the world is full of mystery and wonder,
Yeah.
and that the journey of discovery is just as important as the destination.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's like the most important takeaway you'd like our listeners to ponder?
Mm-hmm.
What's like the essence of Montaigne's legacy?
I think it's this: Montaigne believed that nature was always capable of producing even more remarkable forms than those we already know. And his challenge to us, to you, is to just keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your heart receptive to the wonders that surround you. You never know what remarkable forms you might discover both within yourself and in the world around you.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us on this journey into the mind of Michel de Montaigne.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure exploring his life and ideas with you.
The pleasure was all mine. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring.